The Recovery Kernel. Substance-Specific Navigation Series. How to recover from opioids. Using the Recovery Kernel Framework. Heroin, fentanyl, oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, codeine, tramadol, kratom, prescription opioids. Warning: harm reduction resource, not medical advice. Crisis, call 911 or text 988. Carry naloxone. If you or someone you know uses opioids, naloxone saves lives. Available without prescription at most U.S. pharmacies. Get it before you need it. A note before you begin. This guide is different from any other in this series in one essential way: the opioid epidemic is an active mass casualty event. While you are reading this sentence, someone is dying of an opioid overdose. The rate in the United States alone exceeds 100,000 deaths per year. Fentanyl has contaminated the drug supply so thoroughly that no street opioid can be assumed safe regardless of what it is sold as. This guide therefore opens not with biology but with the most urgent harm reduction information that exists, because the framework in these pages is of no use to someone who does not survive long enough to use it. After the immediate safety section, this guide addresses what the recovery kernel is built to address: the specific biology that made opioids feel necessary, and the systematic reconstruction of the systems they damaged. The compendium's framework applies powerfully to opioid recovery. But nothing in it matters if you are not alive. A note on medication-assisted treatment, MAT. This guide takes the position the recovery kernel compendium takes, stated plainly: buprenorphine and methadone are life-saving medications. Refusing them because it is still drugs has killed people who could have been saved. The person maintained on MAT who is functioning, connected, and building a life is in genuine recovery, regardless of what anyone else says about it. This guide supports MAT as a foundation, not a compromise. Section 0, Immediate Safety. Read this first. Warning: if you are in an overdose emergency, call 911 now. Give naloxone if available. Do not leave the person alone. Naloxone, Narcan, the life-saving reversal. Classical building: the centurion, the single most important harm reduction tool in the opioid crisis. Naloxone is an opioid receptor antagonist that reverses opioid overdose within minutes. It is safe, effective, available without a prescription at most U.S. pharmacies, and has no effect on someone who has not taken opioids. There is no reason not to have it. Recognizing an opioid overdose. Unresponsive or cannot be woken, will not respond to voice or sternal rub. Slow, shallow, or stopped breathing, fewer than one breath every 5 seconds. Choking, gurgling, or snoring sounds, airway obstruction from muscle relaxation. Blue or gray lips, fingertips, or fingernails, cyanosis, oxygen deprivation. Pinpoint pupils, very small, contracted pupils even in dim light. Limp body. If any of these are present, call 911 immediately. Give naloxone. Perform rescue breathing if trained. Place in recovery position, on side, if breathing but unconscious. Do not leave alone. Fentanyl test strips, the supply safety reality. Classical building: the centurion, every street drug must be assumed to contain fentanyl. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and is now present in heroin, counterfeit prescription pills, cocaine, methamphetamine, and even some cannabis products. A lethal dose of fentanyl is approximately 2 milligrams, invisible to the naked eye. There is no safe assumption about street drugs in 2026. Fentanyl test strips, available at many harm reduction organizations, pharmacies, and online. Dissolve a small amount of the substance in water and dip the strip. A positive result means fentanyl is present. A negative result reduces but does not eliminate risk. Never use alone. If you are using, have someone present who can administer naloxone and call 911. The Never Use Alone hotline 1-800-484-3731 provides a live person who will call 911 to your location if you stop responding. Start low, go slow. if using after a period of abstinence, including after any time in treatment, jail, or hospital, your tolerance is gone. A dose that was normal before can be fatal now. This is the highest risk period for opioid overdose death. Good Samaritan laws. Most U.S. states have laws protecting people who call 911 for an overdose from prosecution. Know your state's law. Fear of legal consequences is a primary barrier to calling for help. Section 1. What opioids did to your brain and body. Classical building the centurion, the system that was muted, and the pain that was underneath it. The Recovery Kernel Compendium describes opioids with precise language, total sensory muting, physical agony and existential despair. This is not moralizing. It is mechanistic description of what the opioid receptor system does and what happens when a drug activates it at pharmaceutical scale. Your brain contains mu, kappa, and delta opioid receptors distributed throughout systems that regulate pain, emotional bonding, stress response, reward, and the basic sense of being at home in your own body. Endorphins, your endogenous opioids, are released during physical exertion, social bonding, laughter, touch, and safety. They are the biological substrate of belonging, comfort, and the feeling that life is bearable. Opioids activate these receptors with an intensity that endorphins never reach. The pain stops, not just physical pain but the existential pain of being alive in a difficult body, in a difficult world, with a history that may have been genuinely brutal. This is the function that every person reading this guide already knows. The opioid was not solving a fake problem. It was solving a real one. The question the Recovery Kernel asks is, what was the real problem, and can it be addressed another way? The three-system disruption. The opioid class, a full spectrum. Classical building the centurion, same receptor, different intensities, different recovery timelines. What opioids were managing, the compendium's diagnostic question. Classical building the centurion, the substance is the symptom report. The Recovery Kernel Compendium makes a precise clinical observation: opioids provide total sensory muting for physical agony and existential despair. This tells you something important about the person who found opioids necessary, not as a moral statement but as a diagnostic one. The underlying conditions most commonly driving opioid use disorder include chronic or undertreated physical pain. The opioid began as pain management, legitimate or illegitimate, and the physics of tolerance did the rest. The pain is still there. Recovery requires addressing it directly, not simply removing the medication. Trauma stored in the body, complex PTSD, childhood trauma, and adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, produce a specific kind of chronic physical and emotional pain that opioids are uniquely effective at silencing. The trauma does not disappear in recovery, it becomes louder. Protocol-specific trauma work, referenced in Section 7, is not optional for this profile. Emotional pain and grief, the specific warmth and social belonging that mu-opioid activation produces means that people who are lonely, grieving, or disconnected may find opioids uniquely compelling. The endorphin deficit that opioids were addressing was real. Building endorphin sources through genuine connection becomes a central recovery target. Undertreated psychiatric conditions, depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, all have documented relationships with opioid use disorder as self-medication. Addressing these conditions is part of the biology of recovery, not a separate track. Knowing which condition you were managing does not excuse the consequences of the addiction. It informs the recovery strategy. An opioid user managing chronic pain needs a pain management protocol. An opioid user managing trauma needs trauma-specific treatment. Generic recovery without this specificity produces the predictable result: the drug is removed but the condition it was managing remains untreated, and the pull back to the substance stays biological rather than merely habitual. Section 2, Your Genomic Blueprint. Opioid use disorder has specific genetic architecture that determines both why the substance felt necessary and which recovery strategies will be most effective. The genomic panel for opioid recovery overlaps with the broader recovery kernel framework but has specific variants that are uniquely high stakes in this context. The DNA testing panel for opioid recovery. Phenotyping without test results. If genetic testing is not yet available, the compendium's phenotyping tools give working hypotheses. Did opioids give you pain relief that no other medication could provide, even at doses others found sufficient? Possible OPRM1G/G variant or ABCB1 variant affecting CNS penetration. CYP2D6 testing is important. Did opioids make you feel normal, connected, and at ease in a way nothing else achieved? Strong OPRM1 involvement and likely endorphin system deficit. Social bonding work is central to your recovery architecture. Did prescription opioids begin with legitimate pain management? COMT pain sensitivity variants may be relevant. Undertreated chronic pain requires its own treatment plan alongside opioid recovery. Is depression, anhedonia, and a baseline feeling of emptiness your persistent experience? DRD2 deficit plus MTHFR involvement likely. 5-MTHF and dopamine support are high priority. Did antidepressants or pain medications respond unpredictably, either not working or working far too intensely? CYP2D6 or CYP2C19 variant. Inform all prescribers. Section 3, Detox, Withdrawal, and Medication-Assisted Treatment. Warning: opioid withdrawal is not fatal in most cases, but the relapse risk during withdrawal is extreme. The primary cause of death in opioid withdrawal is not the withdrawal itself. It is relapse followed by overdose with zero tolerance. This distinction matters profoundly. The person suffering through opioid withdrawal is not in immediate danger from the withdrawal itself in most cases. They are in extreme danger from the combination of intolerable suffering and zero tolerance. The person who returns to their prior dose after days of abstinence encounters that dose with the receptor sensitivity of someone who has never used, and dies. Medical supervision of opioid detox exists not primarily to prevent death from the withdrawal syndrome, though it can address that, but to reduce the suffering to a level where the person does not return to use, and to provide the bridge of MAT that makes sustained recovery possible. 3.1 Medication-Assisted Treatment, the foundation, not the compromise. Classical building the centurion, the compendium's position, stated without apology. The Recovery Kernel Compendium states this directly: MAT for opioid addiction consists of life-saving interventions. Refusing them because it is still drugs has killed people who could have been saved. The evidence is unambiguous. Buprenorphine and methadone reduce opioid overdose deaths by 50 to 70% in the populations that use them. Nothing else comes close. No combination of supplements, behavioral interventions, willpower, or spiritual practice produces outcomes remotely comparable to MAT for opioid use disorder in the fentanyl era. This does not mean MAT is the only component of recovery. It means MAT is the foundation on which the rest of the recovery kernel framework is built. The supplement stack, the natural reward architecture, the identity work, the trauma processing, all of this is possible when the person is alive and not in active withdrawal. MAT creates that condition. 3.2 The Withdrawal Management Protocol. Whether managing withdrawal as a bridge to MAT, as preparation for naltrexone initiation, or as the detox approach for lower-intensity opioid dependence, the following medical supports are established clinical practice. 3.3 The Withdrawal Timeline. 3.4 Post-acute withdrawal syndrome in opioid recovery. Warning: pause in opioid recovery can last 18 to 24 months. Fentanyl pause may be longer. This is not weakness. It is neurobiology. Pause in opioid recovery is characterized by waves of anxiety and dysphoria, cravings that appear suddenly without obvious triggers, sleep disruption, emotional numbness alternating with emotional flooding, cognitive fog, and pain sensitivity that fluctuates. Episodes can last hours to days and appear weeks or months after the last use. The OPRM1 genotype affects pause severity, A118G carriers may experience more pronounced social pain and loneliness during pause episodes because of the endorphin system's role in social bonding. These episodes are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of a brain recalibrating a system that was severely disrupted. Pause interrupt protocol, return to protocol 01, shelter, immediately. Contact your MAT provider if on MAT. Contact your support structure. Execute the craving interrupt sequence, Section 5. Increase magnesium and omega-3. Do not be alone with this. Section 4, Biological Reconstruction. Opioid recovery requires the reconstruction of two systems, the endogenous opioid system, endorphins, mu receptor density, social bonding capacity, and the secondary dopamine system damage. These are addressed in parallel. The methylation foundation underlies both. 4.1 The methylation foundation. Same foundation as every guide in this series, but with two opioid-specific additions. 1. MTHFR variants are significantly overrepresented in opioid use disorder. 2. Opioid use itself depletes B vitamins and disrupts methylation cycles, creating a compounding deficit that must be addressed aggressively in early recovery. 4.2 Endorphin system reconstruction. Classical building the centurion, rebuilding the system that provides comfort, connection, and pain tolerance. The endogenous opioid system cannot be supplemented the way dopamine can be supported with precursors. There are no oral endorphin supplements, the peptides do not cross the blood-brain barrier. What can be done is, provide structural support for receptor upregulation, reduce the inflammatory state that suppresses endorphin production, and, most powerfully, use the behaviors and experiences that trigger endorphin release naturally. 4.3 Pain management in opioid recovery. Classical building the centurion, the condition that may have started everything requires its own protocol. Warning: if chronic pain is the underlying driver of your opioid use disorder, removing the opioid without addressing the pain is not recovery. It is suffering without strategy. This is one of the most underaddressed aspects of opioid recovery. Standard addiction treatment focuses on the substance. It frequently neglects the pain, physical or emotional, that made the substance necessary. The result is a person in recovery who is also in unmanaged pain, and who is being told that their only option is to suffer through it. The recovery kernel's position: chronic pain in opioid recovery requires a pain management protocol that is as rigorously designed as the recovery protocol itself. The following non-opioid pain management approaches should be discussed with a pain management physician or palliative care specialist. Non-opioid medications, SNRIs, duloxetine, and tricyclics, amitriptyline, for neuropathic pain, gabapentinoids for nerve pain, with addiction monitoring, NSAIDs for inflammatory pain, topical agents, lidocaine patches, capsaicin, diclofenac gel, for localized pain. Physical modalities: physical therapy, occupational therapy, TENS units, ultrasound therapy, heat and cold therapy, massage, acupuncture, strong evidence for several chronic pain types. Mind-body approaches: mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, has strong evidence for chronic pain and explicitly does not require belief, it changes pain processing neurologically. MBSR also directly addresses the anxiety that amplifies pain perception. Movement as medicine: the relationship between movement and pain relief is documented and profound. Even gentle movement reduces inflammation, releases endorphins, and reduces central sensitization. Protocol 03 in the main compendium, exercise, is not optional for chronic pain in recovery. Buprenorphine for pain: buprenorphine is itself an effective analgesic, meaning that MAT and pain management can be addressed simultaneously with the same medication. This is an underutilized option worth explicit discussion with an addiction medicine and pain management physician. 4.4 Sleep in opioid recovery. Opioids suppress REM sleep and alter sleep architecture profoundly. The sleep that opioids produced was not restorative, it was a chemically induced unconsciousness that prevented the brain from performing the maintenance processes that sleep exists for. In recovery, the return of genuine sleep is both a challenge and a milestone. Melatonin, 0.5 to 1 mg sublingual, 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. Low dose. Do not use high doses, they disrupt rather than support natural circadian rhythm. Magnesium glycinate, 300 to 400 mg elemental evening. Addresses both sleep and the NMDA-mediated hyperexcitability that disrupts sleep in early opioid recovery. Glycine, 3,5G, 30 minutes before bed. Reduces core body temperature, NMDA coagonist that supports the GABA-glutamate balance disrupted by opioid use, strong sleep quality evidence. 5-HTP, 50 to 100 mg evening. Serotonin synthesis support that converts to melatonin. Opioids deplete serotonin, restoring it supports both sleep and daytime mood. Phosphatidylserine, 100 to 200 mg evening. Reduces evening cortisol, the HPA axis rebound in opioid recovery produces elevated evening cortisol that prevents sleep onset. Tart cherry extract, 480 mg or 240 ml juice, evening. Natural melatonin source with anti-inflammatory properties relevant to opioid-induced inflammation. Supports sleep architecture without suppressing REM. Also execute Protocol 17, Sleep Architecture, from the main compendium in full. 4.5, Peptide Support Layer. The following peptides have specific mechanistic relevance to opioid recovery. Physician discussion required, these are research compounds. Section 5, The Opioid Craving, Understanding and Interrupting. Classical building the centurion, opioid cravings are among the most powerful neurological events in human experience. They are also temporary. Opioid cravings peak at approximately 20 to 30 minutes and then subside. This is neurological fact. It has been measured. The craving that feels like it will last forever and consume everything has a biological end point. Your only task is to get through the next 20 minutes. Opioid cravings operate through multiple mechanisms: endorphin deficit craving, the body missing its pain buffer; dopamine deficit craving, the reward system seeking any signal; and cue-triggered craving, the most dangerous, environmental triggers that activate the learned response with extreme force. Cue-triggered craving, the most dangerous type. Warning: CUE-triggered craving in opioid recovery is not the same as wanting. It is a conditioned neurological reflex. Seeing, smelling, or passing through the locations, people, or situations associated with use can produce instantaneous, overwhelming craving with no conscious decision. This is not a failure of willpower. It is a survival circuit that was trained to fire at maximum intensity. The needle, the spoon, the house, the people, the music, any of these can trigger the full craving response in someone who is otherwise doing well. Environmental redesign, Protocol 05, main compendium, is not optional in opioid recovery. It is a life-or-death intervention. The 5-minute opioid craving interrupt, execute immediately. Name the craving type. Endorphin deficit, pain, loneliness, physical discomfort. Dopamine deficit, flatness, boredom, anhedonia. Cue-triggered, specific trigger just fired. The type changes the response. Execute the 4-7-8 breath. 4 full cycles. Now. Not after you finish reading. Now. The parasympathetic response interrupts the automatic quality of the craving to action sequence. Change your physical location immediately. If you are near a cue, a person, a place, a situation, leave it. Do not negotiate with the cue. Leave first, process later. Physical distance from the cue environment is not optional. Make contact. Call your MAT provider, your sponsor, your recovery contact, or the 988 crisis line. The craving circuit loses power in connection. Say what is happening. You do not need to have a conversation, you need to be in contact with another person. Execute your endorphin intervention. Whatever generates the most endorphin release for you fastest: intense exercise, cold water, physical contact with someone safe, laughter, music at high volume. You are activating the same receptor system through a different door. If on mat, remember that you took your medication. It is in your system. The craving is a psychological event, not evidence that the medication failed. The medication is working. The craving is the addiction's death throes. Document. Trigger, type, intensity, 0 to 10, action, outcome. 3 weeks of this data will show you your pattern with a clarity no therapist can achieve through conversation alone. The highest risk situations for opioid relapse, know them before they arrive. Return of tolerance, after any period of abstinence, treatment, incarceration, hospitalization, tolerance is gone. Returning to a prior dose is potentially fatal. Know this before it happens, not in the moment. Pain events, dental procedures, injuries, surgeries, and chronic pain flares are documented relapse triggers. Have a pain management plan in place before you need it. Discuss your history with every treating physician. Grief and loss, deaths of loved ones, relationship endings, job losses, major grief events produce endorphin deficit states that trigger opioid craving specifically and powerfully. Have a grief plan that does not involve isolation. Celebration, counterintuitively, positive life events are relapse triggers. The brain's association between opioids and special occasions can fire at celebrations, milestones, and successes. Know this about yourself. Running out of MAT medication, gaps in MAT due to prescription delays, pharmacy issues, or missed appointments are extremely high-risk periods. Have backup plans for continuity of MAT supply. Missing even 1 day of buprenorphine or methadone can trigger craving severe enough to override recovery commitment. Section 6, Porting the Addiction, Building Your Own Endorphin System. Classical Building the Centurion, Centurion Paper C-28 applied to opioid recovery. The opioid recovery version of the natural addiction architecture has a specific organizing principle that differs from other substances in this series. The primary target is endorphin release, not dopamine. The warrior constitution seeking stimulation needs competition and intensity. The sage constitution seeking calm needs creativity and contemplation. The opioid recovery constitution, which does not map as cleanly to a single COMT phenotype because opioid use disorder spans multiple profiles, needs, warmth, safety, connection, physical comfort, and pain tolerance. These are the endorphin system's native outputs. These are what must be built. Natural endorphin release, the architecture. The social reconnection architecture. Classical building the centurion, the specific recovery target that opioid use disorder attacks most brutally. Opioid use disorder destroys social connection with particular ferocity. The drug produces social warmth neurochemically while simultaneously driving behaviors that destroy actual relationships. The result is a person in recovery who is neurochemically primed for connection, because the endorphin system craves it, and socially devastated, because the addiction destroyed it. Rebuilding social connection is not a therapeutic nicety in opioid recovery. It is an endorphin system intervention. The process. Start with recovery community. 12-step programs, smart recovery, peer recovery support groups, these provide immediate access to people who understand the experience without requiring you to explain or justify it. The social bond formed in shared recovery is unique and powerful. Repair the reparable. Protocol 16, Family and Relationship Repair, in the main compendium. Not all relationships can be repaired, and not all of them should be attempted in early recovery. But the ones that can be, often are worth the work. Build slowly and honestly. The social trust that opioid addiction destroyed was not lost all at once. It will not return all at once. Consistent small actions over months and years rebuild what the addiction destroyed. This is the long game. Physical community. Body-based communities, exercise groups, martial arts, hiking clubs, team sports, provide the combination of physical endorphin release and social connection that is the most potent available natural opioid substitute. Both components together are synergistic. Section 7, Navigating the Recovery Kernel, Your Protocol Map. Section 8, The Medical Support Layer. Opioid use disorder has the most evidence-supported pharmacological treatment of any substance use disorder. The treatment gap, the percentage of people who need and could benefit from MAT but do not receive it, is approximately 80%. This gap kills people. The information below is intended to help close it. Co-occurring conditions requiring direct treatment. Chronic pain requires its own treatment plan. Buprenorphine is an analgesic and may address both simultaneously. Refer to Section 4.3 and Protocol 14 in the main compendium. Depression, extremely common in opioid use disorder, both as a driver and a consequence. MTHFR variant depression responds to 5-MTHF. Conventional depression may require SSRIs or SNRIs. CYP2D6 status affects metabolism of most antidepressants. Treat the depression as a separate medical condition, not as a recovery phase that will resolve on its own. PTSD and trauma, documented in majority of people with OUD. Trauma that is untreated is the most reliable predictor of relapse. Specific trauma treatments, EMDR, CPT, prolonged exposure, somatic therapies, have evidence for PTSD in OUD. Timing of trauma treatment matters, stabilization first. ADHD, significantly overrepresented in OUD, stimulant use as self-medication for undiagnosed ADHD is a documented pathway. DAT1 and DRD4 variants are relevant. In recovery, non-stimulant ADHD treatments, Strattera, Wellbutrin, Intuniv, are preferred. Stimulant treatment in OUD recovery requires very careful clinical judgment. Hepatitis C, blood-borne infection prevalent in 4 drug users. Curative treatment now exists, direct-acting antivirals, 95% plus cure rate, 8 to 12 weeks. Testing and treatment during recovery is standard of care. Curing hepatitis C during recovery improves outcomes and addresses a significant source of ongoing physical illness that complicates recovery. HIV, testing and treatment. Undetectable equals untransmittable, U equals U. Modern HIV treatment does not preclude recovery. GLP-1 agonists in opioid recovery. The 2025 to 2026 data for semaglutide and tirzepatide in opioid use disorder shows preliminary trials demonstrating approximately 40% reduction in overdose risk as an adjunct to buprenorphine or methadone. This is not a replacement for MAT, it is a potential add-on that reduces the reward signal from opioids through dopamine and reward circuit modulation. Discuss with your addiction medicine physician. A final word. Classical building the centurion, the pain was real. The system that sought to silence it was doing its job. The work now is to address what was underneath. This guide was written for the person who used opioids not for pleasure but for survival. For the person whose back would not stop hurting, whose nervous system had been wired for terror by things that happened long before the first pill, whose loneliness was a physical ache that the drug was uniquely, powerfully positioned to relieve. The compendium's dedication is for the ones who ran out of time before anyone told them that what drove them to the substance was biology, not weakness. The opioid crisis has produced more of these losses than any other addiction in modern history. More than 500,000 Americans since 1999. Each one was a person who was managing something real with a tool that was destroying them. You are reading this because you have not yet run out of time. That is the only fact that matters right now. The biology described in this guide is real and it is recoverable. The endorphin system that went offline comes back online. The mu-opioid receptors that downregulated upregulate again. The dopamine system rebuilds. The pain, physical and existential, can be addressed through means that do not require a substance that will kill you. Carry your naloxone. Take your MAT. Call someone when the craving comes. Build the endorphin architecture one day at a time. Get through the next 20 minutes. The Recovery Kernel was built for exactly this journey. Use it. Naloxone, available without prescription at most U.S. pharmacies. Get it. Give it to people you love. Never use alone hotline, 1-800-484-3731 crisis, 988 emergency, 911 SAMHSA, 1-800-662-4357. Refer to the Recovery Kernel Complete Centurion Compendium for all referenced protocols. Warning: harm reduction resource, not medical advice. How to recover from opioids using the Recovery Kernel Substance-Specific Navigation Series.